Uh, welcome everybody. Um, Welcome to the fourth KESRA Economic Dialogue. I'd like to take a moment to just thank you for taking the time to come and listen to us and learn a bit more about drones. Um, so I'm hoping everybody joined okay, and you were able to learn a little bit more about the speakers through the presentation that was playing before. So thank you for your patience. I know we're 2 minutes late, but we're here now. That's what matters, and we can start. So thank you very much, everybody. So I have the very important role of inviting our moderator, so introducing him. I would like to introduce our moderator for this. He is at the Kenya Revenue Authority. He is the commissioner in charge of the Kenya School of Revenue Administration. And prior to joining KRA, he was the founding director of the Mombasa campus of the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, which is also known as JKUAT. So he has previously taught at Kenya Methodist University and has also worked at Kenindia Assurance Company. He has conducted consultancy and training tasks for many national and international organizations in 6 countries, and he sits on the board, various boards and committees. He has in the past served as the chairman of the board recruitment committee for the Technical and Vocational Education and Training Authority, which is also known as TVETA, under the Ministry of Education. He is a member of Rotary International, where he's involved in various philanthropic activities, and he is an author and has published 3 books, namely Leadership Beyond the Boardroom, Journeying to the Horizon, and Teardrops from My Heart, and 1 book chapter and more than 30 research papers in referred journals. So thank you very much. I would like to then hand over to you, Dr. Mugambi, to take over from there.
Thank you very much, Wanjiko. It is my great pleasure to welcome everybody to this very important dialogue that we are having. This is the fourth KESRA Economic Dialogue, and this is a dialogue that we have, and it's one of a series of the various dialogues that we have every 2 months. And today we are looking at a very important, a very fascinating topic, which is the AUVs, also known as is it UAVs, also known as drones. We have a very competent panel with us today, and I'll be introducing them shortly. But before I can introduce them, I want to start by saying something about the topic that we're going to be discussing today. And therefore, drones have been referred to by various terms depending on the context within which you find yourself. And the variations of terms used to describe drones include unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. Sometimes they also call miniature pilotless aircrafts, or even flying mini robots. And the popularity of drones has been rising rapidly in the last few years. And the future of drones, as our panel will be telling us, is a lot more exciting. I will quote some pieces of information here and there. And for instance, Fahari Aviation, which is represented here today, caused quite some buzz in the market a few months ago when they announced that they intended to introduce air taxis in the way of drones to fly routes in Nairobi in the next few years. Something we are anxiously waiting for, if only it will help us beat Nairobi traffic jams. And you can see exactly what I mean when I say that the future of this technology is extremely interesting. Countries like Rwanda have used UAVs in various ways, especially to deliver medical supplies. If you go to the US, you'll notice that they are using, drones to man their southern boundary with Mexico. Drones have been used for a long time in the military space. Now, according to data from Globe Newswire, the global military drone market size is projected to reach about $23.78 billion by 2027. The drone service market size is also expected to grow from about 4.4 billion to about 63 billion dollars by the year 2025. And Insider Intelligence predicts consumer drone shipments to hit 29 million units by the end of 2021. Now, the use cases for unmanned aerial vehicles are as varied as it can get. And these include, uses in hospitality and tourism, delivery of medical supplies, and I quoted the case of Rwanda, aerial surveillance of borders and parks for security purposes, emergency response, including firefighting and humanitarian response activities, cinematography, videography, and so on, sports and entertainment, weather forecasting, commercial transportation, and many others. And for those of us who are in the space of customs and tax, the future is very bright as far as UAVs are concerned, because we are looking at possibilities, for example, of using these facilities to enhance the management of our borders, and possibly also map out properties for purposes of mobilizing public revenue in the rental space. It is therefore clear that the use cases of UAV technologies, especially when this technology is paired with other technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, and thermosensing, among others, are, to say the least, mind-boggling. And that is why we have this very interesting panel here with us today to be able to delve a little deeper into this very interesting, topic that will be looking at the use cases of UAVs, both now and in future. And so straight to my panelists, we have four gentlemen here. Hoping that in future we can also include a few ladies in the panel. A friend of mine told me that today you're having a manel, not a panel. But be it as it may, we have four gentlemen with us here. And allow me to introduce Samuel Sineka. Samuel Sineka is the head of health systems integration at Zipline. And sometimes he's in Ghana, sometimes he's in Nairobi. So Sineka is a pharmacist by profession, and he holds various degrees in project management, supply chain management, health management, business analytics, and public health. He has spent more than 7 years in the hospital setting as accident and emergency pharmacist and a member of the Drugs and Therapeutic Committee. He attained the status of a senior pharmacist before leaving the hospital space. Sineka has also worked for several years in the pharma industry in manufacturing and marketing of pharmaceuticals. He has led and managed various teams representing various ethical pharmaceutical companies, brands from various parts of the world. Now, he has moved slightly from the pharmacist space and is now working with the healthcare in the space of healthcare transformation and logistics, specifically using drones in that particular space. And so we are happy to have you, Samuel. Okay.
Thank you very much, Doc.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Our other panelist for this afternoon is Daniel Haywood. Daniel Haywood is the founder and CEO of Ramani Geosystems, which was founded in 1999. And as you know, Ramani in Kiswahili means maps. This Kenyan company has grown into a well-established geospatial company over the past 23 years and has been involved in a vast array of different aerial and ground survey projects throughout East and Central Africa. With the world of technology moving fast, Ramani has had to keep abreast of all that is on offer in the geospatial sphere, and a major technical change in this industry over the past 5 to 10 years has been the introduction of drones. Ramani is embracing this technology to offer our clients, new solutions, and that is what Daniel is currently pushing. So Daniel has a passion of all things technical and very specifically drones. So we are happy to welcome you, Daniel.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good afternoon to everyone.
You're welcome. And my next panelist is Scott Dubin. And Scott Dubin, this afternoon, I don't know what the time it is there, is tuning in from Geneva, Switzerland. Scott is a supply chain private sector engagement specialist with a global fund where he creates innovative logistical solutions to ensure the uninterrupted supply of vital health supplies around the world. With a consistent focus in logistics, Scott has 20 years of experience designing, implementing, and managing humanitarian development and diplomatic projects in a host of complex environments in the US and abroad. In these roles, he has worked on behalf of NGOs, private companies, and the US government. Scott recently designed and led a cutting-edge initiative to utilize drone technology for delivering much-needed medicines, lab samples, blood transfusions, and vaccines in Malawi. He has also developed a low-cost cloud-based transport management system called TransIT for use in low-resource settings, which is now being transferred to open source software and becoming a global good. Scott holds a Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration and MSc International Business degrees. Scott is married and is a dad to two girls. You're welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Pleasure to join you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last but by no means least is Hawkins Musili Wambua. And so Hawkins is an accomplished engineering and innovation expert with over 10 years experience in managing projects and teams across various functions within the Kenya Airways group. His visionary perspective has earned him opportunities to work on prominent projects such as Fahari Aviation, where he's heading the organization, the emerging technology subsidiary of Kenya Airways, PLC. He is also the founder member of Fahari Aviation. Hawkins currently serves as a general manager with overall responsibility of Fahari Aviation, like I just mentioned. Fahari Aviation is leading the use of unmanned aerial systems, UASs, in the country, with use cases in critical infrastructure inspections, surveillance, agriculture, mapping, research, and conservation, as well as logistics. Previously, as head of engineering services at Kenya Airways, Hawkins led all continuous airworthiness, maintenance, cost management, and asset management activities across the entire fleet of aircraft and engines at the Kenya Airways. He has held responsibility for fleet acquisition and disposal, led the team responsible for power plant engineering, OEM and vendor negotiations, engine cost analysis, and asset management. Hawkins holds an MSc in aeronautical engineering with a specialization in aircraft power plants. And so, again, we are very happy to have you with us, Hawkins.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, everyone.
You're welcome. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is the panel that we have for you today. And we are very excited to be engaging with this panel for the next about 1 hour and a few minutes. And so allow me to go straight into the conversation. And I'm happy to invite Samuel to start us off by telling us a little about himself and also telling us about what he does on a day-to-day basis. So Samuel, I will give you some 7 minutes to make your opening statement.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for this opportunity, and good afternoon to the listeners and then my colleague panelists. So my name is Samuel Sinica, as Commissioner rightly mentioned, and I'm a pharmacist by training. I've actually been working with Zipline for almost 3 years now, and I have been doing systems integration for all this while in various countries, Nigeria, Ghana, Rwanda, now in Kenya, and then a little bit of work in Ivory Coast as well. But then I would like to use this opportunity to just show a small presentation of what Zipline actually does and then how we actually operate. So I'd like to share my screen if you permit me. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Awesome. So for the purpose of this particular occasion, I'm trying to channel Zipline's operations toward the KESRA Economic Dialogue, and then how leveraging this drone technology actually is going to enhance public revenue mobilization and also facilitate trade and socioeconomic growth in Africa. So the main purpose of Zipline is actually to be able to serve every human on earth with instant access to vital medicines. And Zipline's mandate is really channeled toward the sustainable development goals that is actually every country is now pursuing to attain. So Zipline, in every country that we are trying to see how best we can help the systems to achieve these SDGs. So what is Zipline? Zipline, we operate very fast drones that fly in all weathers 24/7 to deliver blood, medicines, and vaccines to all human beings and patients. So Zipline is the only company in the world that is delivering these commodities, these vital commodities, at a national scale on a daily basis. So we have these three things that we actually do in Zipline. One is the warehousing and fulfillment, where we do inventory management, making sure we comply to good distribution practices, and then also best-in-class SOPs. And then we also have on-demand delivery, where we have 100% product availability to all patients and health facilities that we serve, doing this in 24 hours, 7 days in a week. And then we also guarantee 100% cold chain and product quality to all the patients that we serve and health facilities. So we also have a supply chain optimization system where warning systems are also given. We have transparency and then data planning and preparedness that is also shared to our stakeholders for data visibility. So this is how Zipline actually works. We have a healthcare personnel who needs a product for a patient. Let's say a patient is having postpartum hemorrhage in the hospital. All that the nurse needs to do or the doctor needs to do is just take a phone, call our toll-free line, and then place an order for any blood unit for that particular emergency case. This order is then confirmed and then packed in a package. Then the package is put into our drones. Subsequently, you see how the very physical nature of the drones. So the package is put into the belly of the drone, and then the drone flies to deliver the package. This is usually done within a very short period of time. From the time the order is confirmed to the time it is launched, we have ambitious time of 5 minutes. And then we fly 80-kilometer radius from our distribution center. The farthest point is actually reached within 45 minutes. This is what with a car, we would have done about 5-hour trip to get to that destination. So this is a practical representation of what actually happens where the flight takes off and then reaches the facility, drops the package, and then the zip comes back to the distribution center and is recovered mid-air. So this is a typical representation of a distribution center that we have. This is where the very first distribution center in Ghana. The interesting thing about Zipline is wherever we locate to, we hire 50 highly skilled personnel to man the distribution center. And these are local people from the local vicinity where we established. So for instance, in the Kisumu County that we are, all the people that are actually manning the distribution center, the pharmacists, the engineers, are all locally hired people that man the distribution centers. With our drones too, we have a payload of actually 2 kg and planning on scaling to 3 kg. Now, how does Zipline also support health systems during the COVID-19 period? We know that this was a period where the world saw that we didn't have robust supply chain system in place because all the supply chain system had broken, and then it revealed how our supply chain in the world wasn't very robust to meet pandemics that was plaguing the world. So Zipline's presence was very, very crucial as we did one COVID sample delivery in Ghana, where we delivered more than 100,000 COVID samples to the testing centers. During this period, also in Rwanda, we delivered cancer medications to cancer patients because they only had one treatment center. And then in this period where people had these underlying conditions and were very vulnerable to the deadly effects of COVID, Zipline stepped in to deliver these products to their homes or closer to them where they could just get equal health care. Then we also delivered vital medicines and vaccines to the patient. So in Ghana, for instance, we deliver over 1 million doses of the COVID vaccine, and these are actually vaccines that were very close to expiries. Now we all usually operate looking at 3 major use cases. One is in the vaccine logistics, where we've already showcased how we supply the COVID vaccines. This we actually do by we have reduced 33% fewer missed vaccinations, and then we've reduced reliance on satellite cold chain, where the government didn't have to, put satellite cold chains at every facility to store the vaccines, but then all these were centralized in Zipline, and then we did on-demand delivery of the vaccines to the patients. In the respect of blood, we've been able to, one, storage maintenance cost has been reduced. This is a study that is actually done in Rwanda by 30 to 60%. Then we've also have 100% reduction in logistics costs for delivering blood to hospitals in Rwanda. And then we've had about more than 95% satisfactory rate and reduced wastage by 90%. And this is one of the critical benefits that we actually have in Rwanda, and then scaling to other countries, and then soon in Kenya. Actually in Rwanda right now, we do about 70% of the blood supply chain in Rwanda. Then it comes to essential medicines, where especially sporadic medicines or sporadic out-of-stock medicines or how to store medicines are actually centralized in Zipline. An example is anti-snake or anti-venom, where you do not know where snake bite cases will usually go. So these products actually being centralized in Zipline and then delivered on time or real time, it has become very crucial for the government to know that, okay, even with the little anti-venom that we have, it is going to the patients that need it, and not poor forecasting that mostly is the case in most health facilities. So we've also just dived into a very new area of agricultural use case, where we supply animal cryonics and then animal vaccines to farmers also. And this is just a graphical projection of how the demand is also in that respect. From the onset of Zipline's operation, this is just the data from 2019 to date. This has been the growth part of deliveries that we've actually done. Now we've served more than 2,900 hospitals in 9 countries, and we've served more than 3.7 million units of products. We've served about 350,000 emergency deliveries, and all these we actually have more than 200 SKUs or storekeeping units in our warehouses. Now, one of the very good impact that we have as Zipline is the fact that in the niche, you see the first graph where usually health facilities will run out of stock on products. Now with Zipline, we just keep them afloat from the zero line, where we can usually resupply them when they are going low on stock or running out of stock on certain products. We just buffer them and keep them afloat the zero line. And then we also come to the cost-benefit analysis of aerial logistics, where you will actually see where these are the various options of logistics in the health sector, where a hospital has to use its vehicle. These are the cost components. In there, where an Uber or taxi has to go, this is the cost component. But in the case of zipline, this is the cost component of it. Now you can also look at rate, where this would have been done in 5 to 6 hours, but zipline only uses 30 minutes to do these deliveries, which comes to tell us how impactful speed is, which zipline or aerial logistics is actually leveraging in this modern era. I usually like to leverage to compare zipline to, and then a traditional mode of delivery to, communication, where we use letters. We initially use letters to communicate, and now we have phones. That is what I usually compare zipline to. Now we just have to use the aerial logistics, which is much faster, convenient, and then readily available for all patients and health facilities to use. So these are some more details that we also have with regards to even product losses and damages, which is very minimal in the use of aerial logistics. This is just a graphical representation of all the areas, the countries that we are currently operating in, and then the future, what the future also holds for aerial logistics, especially with zipline, where we are trying to go into pharmaceuticals and home care delivery, which is actually being piloted in Rwanda. We are going into e-commerce and then post and parcel services as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner, and then our listeners. So this is where I bring my introduction to an end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samuel, for that very interesting, introduction to the topic that we are discussing today, and especially looking at what you're doing in the pharmaceutical logistics area. And now I want to invite Scott all the way from Geneva. Scott, you're welcome. Please give us your opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, and thank you for having me, and thank you to the Kenya Revenue Authority for putting on this event and having me as well. This is an exciting topic to discuss. As you had mentioned, I sit in Geneva. I'm with the Global Fund, and the Global Fund is an organization that finances public health projects in the area of HIV, malaria, and TB, and we work in over 100 countries. We spend roughly $4 billion a year on these initiatives. My role in the organization is on the supply chain team, and I focus on in-country supply chains, and more specifically on private sector engagement within the supply chain. So how do we engage the private sector, both in transactional activities as well as just conversations to obtain good technical input. But the private sector plays a very valuable role, as I'm sure you all know, and are the ones who tend to innovate a lot and invest in technology. So they are part of the solution for the work that we do. My previous experience has been in a similar area. I've worked in logistics for almost 20 years, largely focusing on humanitarian relief, and then moved into public health logistics. I currently work for the Global Fund, but I previously worked for USAID, which is the United States Agency for International Development. And in my role there, we had received funding as part of a very large supply chain project, which covered over 40 countries. And I provided technical assistance on warehousing and distribution. So we're always trying to solve problems for how can we improve the flow of products to our customers, which are patients in this case. And it's often challenging environments. So we're always looking for new ways to tackle that problem. And we were fortunate enough to receive funding for drones, and this was in 2017. And they really, drones really hadn't been used that significantly, and even now we could probably say the same, not very widely, but we were very fortunate because there wasn't much funding for drones. So as opposed to thinking about how to use a drone, we were able to test drones. But when you're handed the money, you're excited, and then you start realizing there's a lot to learn. Because first you need to figure out what type of drones are there, what companies exist, what have those companies done? So assess the market and really understand the technology and experience these companies have, understand what we want to achieve with the drone project, And those are important things to know because you should know what you want to achieve, and then you try to figure out what drone makes sense and what drone manufacturer would you work with. And then we start thinking about what country would we want to do this in. And as many countries haven't done this before, it can be a long road to getting approval. We have found that on the continent of Africa, there has been more openness to drones than even in my home country at the time in the US. So there was great opportunity within Africa, and we wanted to look at countries and to determine which countries would be best for a use case. Where is there a need that we could use a drone to see the value of the drone? We were interested in testing not the drone technology, can a drone fly from here to there and back? That is not what we wanted to test. We wanted to know what would be the value of a drone in a public health setting. And in our case, since we were focusing a lot on HIV, as well as other health areas, but for HIV, we had the need to collect lab samples. So not only deliver product, but to collect samples to return with. And so we looked at a variety of countries, and certainly we found some that had needs. And then you also want to find countries that are open to using drones and that have regulations that are favorable for using drones, and preferably countries that are familiar with drones to some extent. Because if they aren't, or they have no regulations, it can be years before you would get approval to fly a drone. So we had initially went to Lesotho, we looked at Zambia, we looked at Rwanda, and then we settled on Malawi. And Malawi had experience with the drone corridor that UNICEF had started. So they had drones already flying there and an area to be tested. And so we pursued that country, and we looked within the country, and we found the Nakata Bay region, which had an island, 2 islands, and as well as some villages along the Lake Malawi, that were almost like islands. They were very cut off from regular roads. And so they clearly had a need. And in this case, it wasn't just a matter of doing something faster, but doing something that couldn't have otherwise be done if we didn't have a drone. There was no quick way to get to an island. The boats were very slow, often not available. So to provide some emergency assistance was something that we couldn't have otherwise done. The delivery of products when they're out of stock, or the movement of lab samples, what it did was it increased the speed, but it also increased or decreased the amount of loss. They had something like 60% loss of samples or the paper-based results, which would come back when they're shipped back and forth, because they would be handed to somebody going on the ferry. So it was a very valuable activity we wound up running for 9 months. It was the first of its kind to be doing bi-directional flights. It hadn't been done before. And it was also unique in the way that it was for a 9-month period of time. Sometimes you hear about drone projects that test drones for 1 week, or maybe even 2 days, or maybe up to a month. But trying to staff a project for a long period of time is much different and is much more complicated than just for a week or 2. We gained very valuable insight, and the whole purpose of the activity was to learn and to share our learning so others can build on that. And you'll find information available online on USAID website about lessons learned from that activity, how to procure a drone, what you would look for when procuring a drone, comparing companies, and how you assess countries to determine the feasibility to run a drone project. So it is an exciting time for drones. I am happy to participate in this discussion, and glad to hear this conversation is taking place and others are tuning in to learn about it. We can certainly shape the future of how drones are used from this point forward, because we're really at the infancy, especially at the cargo side of drones. The mapping side is more mature, and there's just a lot still to be done. And so I'm glad the conversation is happening, and glad to be joining you all today. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Scott. We are happy to have you, like I said, coming all the way from Geneva. And now let's switch gears and invite Daniel to give us his opening statement. Daniel from Ramani.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I hope you can all hear me loud and clear.
Yes, we can.
My name's Daniel Hayward. I'm the CEO of Ramani Geosystems. I'm going to just share my screen. And so I'm hoping you can all see that. And so as I say, my name's Daniel Hayward, CEO of Romani Geosystems. We are a geospatial company, and I am here on the panel representing the geospatial industry in the use of drones. So I was going to talk a little bit about what the geospatial industry is, because it's not always clear what we do, and just talk very briefly about how it fits in with our industry, how drones fit in with our industry. And I'm going to finish on with some rather interesting images, which we collect in a line of our work. So what is the geospatial industry? It's essentially the use of data that has a reference to a particular location on Earth. So somebody described it, it involves the gathering, the storing, the processing, the integrating, the managing, the mapping, the analysis and distribution of any data tied to a particular location on Earth, which is a huge mouthful, but essentially any data that has a location, and anyone who's manipulating that or collecting it is working in the geospatial industry. Romani, as a company, we do 4 things. We capture data, we process that data, we analyze that data, and we distribute that data. And this can be for any purposes. So one of our main projects, or one of the main uses is for urban planning, for instance, for county governments. We do a lot of mapping of towns. We also do a lot of mapping for infrastructure. So we do roads and things like that. So essentially, the geospatial industry, just to go back to that, it has a bit of an identity crisis. And I'm just bringing this up because many of you would have heard all of these terms, or some of these terms. And over the years, it's really changed. We were once known as the geoinformation industry, land surveying, geodetic survey, GIS. You would have heard a lot about geomatics engineering. But essentially, over time, over the last 20 years, we've come to collectively call our industry the geospatial industry. But you can see where all the confusion comes from, and you would have come across those different terms. What are the different technologies we use in our industry? And drones is a small part of this. Essentially, there is the GIS and spatial analytics aspect, which is all the web-based and the desktop side and the mobile. You then got positioning and GNSS, which is essentially the surveying side, the people that you see surveying. You then have Earth observation, where we use satellites, aircraft, and UAVs. And then you've got the scanning aspect of the technologies, which is LiDAR and laser scanning. What we're mainly focused on today is the Earth observation. Now, how does that fit into our industry? Drones are they're a recent addition to our industry. But we've been doing Earth observation for the last 100 years. It started in the First World War, so certainly over 100 years now. We've been doing it from aircraft, and we've been doing it from satellites for about 50 years. And we've obviously been doing land survey for hundreds of years. So drones fits into a very, very nice little niche where it fits somewhere between land surveying and aircraft survey. Romani is predominantly an aircraft survey company, and we also are a land survey company, and therefore drones fits beautifully in between these 2 areas. The main difference between all of those is the level of resolution, the level of detail you can capture from your cameras or your different sensors, but also how much area can you collect. So if you wanted to map a country quickly, you need to be using satellite imagery. If you want to map a large area to high resolution like a big city, you would use aircraft at the moment. If you want to do a slightly smaller area and you want to do that quickly, drones is where you would go. And then if you're getting very accurate data on the ground, you would do a land survey. There's definitely areas of overlap that you can use and different accuracies, but essentially drones fits in very neatly in between those 2 different technologies. So I hope that gives you an idea of where drones fits in with our industry. The main thing is that the drone is a platform to carry a sensor. So there are 2 aspects that are very important when using drones in the geospatial industry. One of them is what camera or what sensor you're using. So you can use a camera, you can use a laser system, you can use a thermal camera, you can use a multispectral camera. All of them have different uses. And you can put them onto different platforms. So for instance, the zipline drone is a heavy drone which can take 2 kilos of load. So you could fit a camera into a drone like that. And I'm sure they've tried that. But and there are different types of drones, big, tiny ones to very large ones. I'm just going to finish on some quite interesting, because we're in a what I like to think is a very cool industry. I'm going to show some images which we've collected over the years, and which also shows the power of spatial data, because that's what it's all about, is the spatial data. The first image is taken over Nairobi in an area called KESRA. And this image was captured in 2013, and it's an informal settlement. But we noticed that there was some rather interesting patterns on the roofs of these houses. And you can see the eyes and the artwork. These are actually, we did quite a lot of investigation into this, to why these were on the roofs of an informal settlement. There are tarpaulins covering the house. And as you can see, there's some quite interesting images there. And this is a series of images very quickly that shows you the power of temporal data. This is data over time. So this image is from 1978. It's a scanned image of an aerial photo of a quarry. This is a stone quarry in Nairobi, near Enterprise Road, and between Enterprise and Outer Ring Road. And what I'm going to show you is how this has changed over time. So this, in 1978, was a working stone quarry. This is 2009. This is now a dormant quarry that is 40 meters deep. It's full of water, and you can see there's informal construction around it. 2009, 2011, it becomes a rubbish dump, a waste dump. So there is essentially garbage being pushed into the old quarry. As you can see in the right-hand corner, it's floating on water. And as we go through, this is 2013, the 40-meter, 50-meter deep quarry now is starting to get very full. And it's full of the garbage. And you can see the construction is getting a bit more dense around it. This is 2015. The quarry site now is completely full. And this is just to the north of that is the Nairobi River. So that's 2015. 1 year later, exactly, there's now construction being taking place on top of that garbage dump. And a small layer of topsoil is put on top of the garbage. 1 year after that, 2016, further construction, as you can see. And you can see there's quite a lot of burning of the rubbish, so that'd be very toxic fumes. 2017, 2018, and as 2018 or 2019, that is. And if you go back from 2019 to 2009, that's 10 years. 10 years between a dormant quarry with water in it to a fully developed informal settlement. And that data, you know, I always talk about how mapping can tell a story. And it really can tell a story. You couldn't write that unless you could see it and see how powerful that is. So that's an introduction from Romani and from myself now, and the geospatial industry. Thank you very much. And if anyone's wondering, that last image is taken over Lake Victoria from one of our aircraft, showing the algae in Lake Victoria. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Very much appreciated. It's amazing. You know what story you know these photos can tell. I now want to go to Hawkins Musili, working with Aviation. I had the opportunity of spending some time with Hawkins a few months ago, and it is amazing what is happening in that space at Fahari. And I know that as we move along, we'll now start delving deeper into what this technology can do to help mobilize public revenue. And so Hawkins, over to you for your opening statement.
Thank you, Commish, for that kind introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Just like to highlight what we've been able to do so far at Fahari and what our vision is. We'll focus on the theme for the day today, looking at using drone technology to enhance public revenue mobilization. What I'll also do towards the end, if time allows, show a short video of what we are working on as part of of our aviation and what we would want the future of unmanned flight to be. So in the area of border management, and I'll focus more on what drones can do in these particular areas, is we are able to, and this is an aspect we've discussed severally with various players, is about using drones for surveillance. And for the sake of revenue mobilization, especially for border management in particular, you're able to use drones to survey over long stretches of border. We have discussed over various models in which you can use drones for day and night surveillance. You can also go ahead and mount, to Daniel's point earlier, you mount various payloads. Payloads are cameras, sensors that you can mount on drones to give you inputs that would later be transformed into information for that. So that will help the command and control center that's helping the teams on the ground monitor the flight of the drones and get that information and translate it into actionable intelligence, having law enforcement on ground and making sure that you're able to mobilize revenue. From a point of view of asset management, especially for revenue mobilization, we're seeing an aspect of using drones to take images, generate maps, 3D maps. What you can do with what Commissioner mentioned earlier, especially bring in processing technology from the point of view of artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, especially for built-up areas. You can, for example, the case in point here is you can be able to take the floor space in a building using AI, be able to identify the number of units in that area, and from a revenue mobilization angle, you're then able to translate that into revenue for the organization. Now, transforming African trade, and we have seen drones being put into several use cases. We initially talked about surveillance. We're now talking about inspection of critical infrastructure. We are looking at especially agriculture. And at Fire Aviation, what we've been able to do is we've been able to onboard various customers in the agricultural side that are bringing in the use of this technology. There's considerable improvements from a quality of application perspective, from time consumed for application. We are reducing that by almost 75% for most of our customers. And beyond that, looking ahead, we're looking at logistics. The logistic use case or particular case in point here is we're currently struggling, especially from a drone technology perspective, from a payload and range question, because most of the drones that you're seeing out there are able to carry maybe 4 to 10 kilos over a range of maybe 70 kilometers, 80 kilometers at most. So at Fire Aviation, what we've done, and together with our partners, is working on solutions that will be able to multiply that payload maybe to around 200, 300 kilos, and that range to almost 1,000 kilometers. What that helps is you're able to have solutions, especially for just looking at our republic, you're able to have solutions from a logistics perspective that can be scaled across the entire country. Most of the use cases or problem statements we're getting from our prospective customers is we want to carry, for example, 100 kilos. Can you position technology that will help us do that cost effectively? So that's part of what we're working on at Fire Aviation. We think also from a regulatory standpoint, and actually what brought Fire Aviation into being, part of it was the domain expertise from the Kenya Airways group into the whole aviation sector. For us, it was a lot more easier to understand the regulations, the technology behind it, because most of what we've worked on. And what that helps is we are able to influence fellow players in the sector, influence the regulator, both in country and within the region, to harmonize regulations. So what that will do for players such as Daniel and ourselves is to have compliance in one country that is replicated across the entire region. Because if you look at most companies that are operating in Kenya, all of them operate across the entire region. So having compliance that is streamlined will help take or optimize the benefits from this technology. Looking ahead, I know Commissioner talked about flying taxis. The technical language you have for it is electrical vertical and takeoff equipment. This is a technology that is still in development, and part of the reason why Fahari Aviation is getting into this particular venture is to participate in the development of this technology. More often from this part of the world, we've always been not developers, but consumers of technology. So we are always at the tail end of application. So what Fahari Aviation has decided to do with this particular announcement with EVE is to go into the development cycle, influence the various factors that will create what you see now on my screen on the left side, and also the ecosystem about urban air traffic management. Because without the relevant ecosystem, the relevant vertiports that you require to support urban air traffic, or what we call advanced air mobility, then it will always seem like a dream. So with that, I will just show a short video here. Yeah, so that's a bit of what is going on in the background from an advanced air mobility perspective. But at this moment, we're able to offer solutions to an entire sector or an entire set of industries. Solutions such as surveillance, inspections. There are a lot of solutions in agriculture, including spraying, spreading, crop head surveillance that will help our farmers actually realize maximum benefit or maximum yield from their crop. Is mapping and GIS, the point that Daniel has spoken about, and then in the oil conservation space. We are seeing a lot of use cases that will help what is very dear to this country, and that is our wildlife and natural and nature in terms of conserving it. So that's it from us. Back to you, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hawkins. Absolutely interesting presentation here. But did I hear you say that the technology is now able to do geospatial mapping of properties?
Yeah, that is something that the technology is now able to do. And with
just a second, how would that work, especially with reference to the kind of work that we do, public revenue mobilization?
Yeah.
And I think that is a question that I'm going to float to Ramani as well. You know, they are doing the same kind of work around. Proceed, Hawkins.
Yeah, to that point, what you'd be able to do here is you're able to take images across an area. For example, an area, especially for revenue mobilization, I know most likely you're looking at areas that have high-rise buildings where maybe rental income has a particular target on the organization, or from a revenue administration perspective, you're not able to meet your targets. So what that would do when you bring in processing capability, especially in AI and machine learning, you're able to estimate, for example, the floor space that is per floor for every building, and the number of units approximately for every building. And going with the market rental rates, then you're able to estimate the expected rental income tax payable to the authority from a particular area. Now, when you go back into your system and look at the current received revenue, then you're able to put targeted measures on a particular area in terms of enforcement or additional issues in terms of dealing with that particular target.
Oh, I'm sure that is music to the ears of domestic taxes personnel, not just from Kenya. We have a lot of revenue authorities tuned in. That is music to their ears, because everybody is looking at how do we optimize, collection of public revenue, especially taxes from rental properties. Daniel, would you want to say anything towards that end?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Commissioner. Absolutely. The technology of mapping buildings and getting 3D models has been around. It's more about the sensor that you're using, and then drones for smaller areas and aircraft for larger areas. But one of the things that this kind of geospatial data is used extremely effectively is in the valuation role for properties. So if you are paying your land rates on the value of your land, and you change the value of your land, for instance, you build an additional wing to your house, or an extra floor, or a new kitchen, how do you assess that as a revenue authority? In cities such as Cape Town, they're flying over their city pretty much every year, every 2 years, and redefining the valuation role every year. And they can look at a property from every angle from the air and establish, have you increased the value? Have you built a new house on your property? So that's a very effective way. Geospatial data is the most effective way of gathering your valuation role. And then you then can actually collect more revenue from it. But I think the key is knowing what is where. It's all about knowing where things are in order for you to help you collect that revenue and manage it.
Amazing. Scott, coming back to you, especially because you see it as a vantage point where you're able to see what is happening virtually globally as far as this technology is concerned. Where would you say the world is right now as far as drone technology is concerned? What are some of the things that some of the countries, especially in Europe and perhaps in the US, are doing that the African countries could pick perhaps and start implementing?
Thank you for the question. It's an interesting one, and one that we kind of discuss with other colleagues of mine who work with drones, kind of where we're at, and hopefully it's not too controversial, but sometimes I think the perception is that we are further along than we actually are, that more is known than actually is known, and more has been done than has actually been done. Because we tend to see things on the news quite a bit, and a flash of this here and a flash of this there, and the viewer might not know that that was only run for 1 week or 1 month, or that delivery system in North Carolina in the US is really just taking place on a university, so it's controlled space. It wasn't as difficult to get approval for. So I'd say that it's not as far along. Lots of questions still need to be answered. I think we have more, and I'm talking about cargo delivery here, just to qualify this. There's a lot left to learn in terms of when to use it, but I see an increasing amount of innovative ways that drones are used for imaging. And again, this is a much more mature sector than is for cargo. But it's really fascinating to see how drones can be used to take inventory in warehouses. Again, I work in logistics, so we can have a little drone fly around a warehouse and scan the warehouse and do inventory much quicker than a human can do it. We're constantly seeing our emergency services starting to incorporate drone technology. This is becoming more common, at least in the United States, and I'm starting to see in Europe. And as you had mentioned, Mr. Commissioner, along borders as such, but to be able to help law enforcement, to help firefighters, even medical devices, having a defibrillator being brought to the scene where somebody who's having a heart attack as well. Really helpful in land disputes and being able to also monitor for environmental purposes. We see a lot of monitoring of power lines, as well as for construction, and the agriculture sector, really helping to improve land use and water use. Certainly search and rescue operations. We see a lot of a really innovative one that was shared with me last year was in universities in America. There was some that are using drones to accompany women as they are walking across campus by themselves. So they feel uncomfortable to be walking on their own, and a drone will follow them along. But I think in general, I think it's very important to understand what we know and don't know. And I think this is, if I had to pick a topic that was most important to me, is that we have a very common understanding of what is possible with drones right now. And also people understand their needs. So if you understand your needs, you can better assess what a drone can do for you. But we always want to consider the source of where this information is coming from. Often people who are in a new type of technology, things are often exaggerated what they can do. And the messenger is certainly somebody who might be selling you something. There's a lot of money involved in drones at the moment, lots of venture capital money coming in. So there's a big, there's maybe I'd say not a lack of common understanding. And so I think that's important, because if people have realistic expectations of what the drone can do, of what the technology is, we're more likely to feel comfortable engaging with that technology and incorporating it into our lives and into our businesses and other official manners. Over.
Thank you, Scott. Samuel, you've been involved in medical logistics. Transportation of medical supplies from one location to the other using drones. And you've been doing this in different countries, Ghana, Rwanda, and now Malawi. What challenges have you encountered in terms of the regulatory environment in the various countries that you've dealt with? And are you encountering that in Kenya?
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for the question. And then thanks the listeners and all these panelists for still being here. So one of the major challenges that we usually face in most new countries we go to is the technology is very new. We are looking at a very wide scale operations. Like one distribution center could actually serve around 800 to 900 health facilities, which will mean that there will be a lot of drones flying in the air. There is also the instances where we look at our capacity of flight in a day, where within the first 12 hours, we are able to do 300 flights in 12 hours. And then if you are operating into, since we are doing 24 hours, it just means double the number or more, means that there is so many drones that are going to be flying in the airspace. Now, one of the challenges has always been, because it is new and because of the scale at which we want to operate, regulators are very skeptical about how safe it is that our drones fly in the airspace, that they have their helicopters flying in, they have their commercial planes flying in, and all that. This has been one of the very, very big challenges that we've faced. So we have to prove to them how safe our drones are. Over the time, we have updated and then modified our drones to be very, very safe. Initially, I will be very frank, it wasn't very rosy. We had a lot of flight failures, and then which was very dangerous. But as it goes on and as we scaled, even in about 500 to 600 deliveries, you wouldn't even see an incident. Now, with this data that we've collected, it is making things much easier. However, since you are going into a new airspace or a new country where they are yet to accept that scale of delivery, the regulators are usually very strict that will meet each and every standard operations that they have outlined. Yes, in Kenya, in the beginning it wasn't easy. Now we are still waiting for KCAA to give us approval, which we have green light on. I think it's low we just did an inspection last week, and then we had a very favorable response and then feedback from them. And that's giving us the green light that we are going to get the approval either within this week or next week to start our commercial flight. And this is good news. I think Kenya is not new to drones, and that's been the reason why we've been able to move very fast on the regulators actually accepting the kind of operations that we are doing here. In other African countries, it's taking us quite a while to still get approval to fly, and that is we are still working around. I think there is different dynamics in different countries that you actually go into, and that is also one of the challenges that we face, because it looks like one solution doesn't solve all the problems, because different countries also have different regulations and how sensitive the area is. But then I think with the much data that we are collecting, and also with our safety records that we have, and also we've just incorporated something in our drones that we call the DAA, detect and avoid system, which has actually enhanced our safety network much higher than most other drones, and that is one of the advantages we currently have that is going to speed up the acceptance of zipline in all the new countries that we are rolling out to.
So Samuel, if I got you well, you're seeking to obtain a license to start running commercial flights. You said drone flights.
Yes.
What do you mean by commercial drone flights?
So commercial drone flight means that, so what we are doing the flight on a very large scale. For Kisumu, for instance, where we are starting, we are looking at actually starting with 100 health facilities. And this, we are looking at a day where we can actually fly more about 150, we can do 150 to 300 deliveries. At this scale, it becomes commercial to the county. Initially, we couldn't have the country. Initially, we weren't doing this much flight. We would just have done like 1 or 2 deliveries in a week when we had started all the way in Rwanda. But now, looking at how there is acceptance and also the need, and then how impactful Zipline has been, there is that need that we usually onboard a lot of health facilities and then do large-scale flight to the different health facilities that we are actually onboarding.
Do you still have a challenge of the payload? How much payload have you been able to achieve up to this point? And perhaps for purposes of our viewers, you can also tell us what we mean by payload.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner, for the question. So right now our payload is 2 kilograms. Now, payload is the amount of the weight of a product that the drone can take. So, which means that if we are looking at blood, how many blood units will make up 2 kg? That is a payload that a drone can take. Now we are at 2 kg. We are working toward getting 3 kg. There is something very good about lower payloads, because one of the very big challenges we face in the health sectors, which I have been a victim of because I worked in the stores, has always been very poor forecasting, where let's say the month of January to March, somebody requests for anti-malarials, and then let's say 100, and then the person gets 200 cases for malaria, and then they run low on stock of malaria drugs. Now the next month, the person now, with the past data, will request for around 300 so that they have a buffer just in case they are exceeding the predicted values. Now they've forgotten that maybe the next 3 months also is not malaria season. So they have so much of the malaria drugs actually lying there and expiring. And then another vicinity actually doesn't have malaria drugs to treat their malaria patients. So this is where the smaller payloads come in and very beneficial, where you just deliver the quantity that is needed at the particular moment, either for a day or for a week, to just sustain the health facility. Then another benefit of the smaller payload is the fact that when the product is very scarce, especially a typical example in Africa is actually anti-rabies and then anti-snake venom, where it is very scarce to get, but we have so many cases of such incidents in Africa. Now, a facility can order for 100 of anti-snake. Another facility doesn't even get one anti-snake to order. But that facility that has 0 anti-snakes now requires snake bite. The next action is to transfer the patient to a higher health facility or to the facility that has anti-snake. And we know that during this travel period, that is where the shaking and then the delays and everything is what is actually causing the envenomation and then the complications and everything. So centralizing most of these scarce resources, where you can just deliver the quantity that is needed to the real patient, real-time delivery, is very beneficial, and that is also a very good advantage of smaller payloads. However, we also have those use cases that also need like bigger use cases, like we have in Rwanda, where we are doing child malnutrition cases where we have to deliver F100, F75, and all those things because of high malnutrition rates in there. Higher payload also counts in because maybe you have to send F75 like 2-3 packages just to save a particular patient who is having severe acute malnutrition to be cured.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Daniel, I'm coming back to you shortly, and I'll be asking you to explain to us the regulatory environment of, this particular technology. But let me first of all go to Hawkins. Hawkins, so country X has a border that is not very safe, and it becomes difficult to deploy staff to that border. What is the use case for drones in solving that particular problem? Maybe you can give us a picture of how we can use drones to patrol our borders and manage our borders and get data transmitted directly from the borders to help us make decisions.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner, for the question. Yeah, so we're looking at an insecurity case and border control, more or less. So, I'll take, for example, on our border to the northeast. You're looking at almost 900 kilometers of border, and you'd like to now cost-effective way, because I think there are other technologies that are currently available that could help you with that, but in a cost-effective way, make sure that that border is controlled. So what you'd want to do here is ensure that you have fast equipment and personnel. Equipment from the point of view that you have drones with long endurance and personnel who are trained to operate these drones remotely. So what would happen here is you would be dispatching missions maybe on a selected frequency, depending on the risk analysis that has been done on this particular border. Maybe frequencies of 2 hours, frequencies of 6 hours, depending on what you consider most effective. You are able to get either live feed from this drone, or you are able to record continuously images from this particular drone, which are either relayed live to a control and command center, or when the drone reports back to base, you're able to review the footage and take the necessary actions. So what that saves you, for example, if you were to do that by either manned aircraft or even boots on the ground, there is a fast, significant cost efficiency. Because if you're looking at the cost of acquiring aircraft for the same, or putting boots on the ground in armored vehicles or in even your normal Hilux pickups, then the cost would be significantly higher. So that we see as the use case for the same. In particular, with particular payloads, you're actually able to focus on points of interest where you're following maybe a particular convoy of vehicles that you think of a particular interest, able to put in payloads that give you night vision, they give you infrared information on movement, electrical optical sensors. So, Commissioner, what's important here is to understand the particular risk of this particular area and also put in the equipment and personnel that are able to relay the information, and that information is used by either law enforcement or any other enforcement agencies to achieve the required goal.
Thank you very much, Hawkins. Daniel, the regulatory environment, especially in this country, I'm sure you've gone through that cycle. And even as you answer that question, then you may want to combine it with, privacy issues. Do I really want a drone flying over my house in the name of security surveillance?
Thank you, Commissioner. It's a big topic, the regulation side of it, and as Scott mentioned, Africa has actually been a pretty big leader in this in terms of getting something done. It's absolutely essential that the drone industry is regulated. You can buy a drone off the internet for $500 and it can do amazing things, which is what's so phenomenal. You have the Pro Box of drones all the way to the Rolls Royces, so it's essential that it is regulated, and it has been, I think, a challenge for each and every country. And the civil aviation authorities, in our case, the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority is the regulator of drones, and we have some pretty good regulation now. And each company has to, if they're going to be operating commercially or even privately for sport or for fun, you've got to go through some regulations. Each company has to acquire and get an ROC, which is a remote operating. I don't know, I've always known it as ROC. Hawkins, you can tell me what an ROC stands for.
Remote operator certificate.
Remote operator certificate. You have to have, your pilots have to be certified. There are some training schools now in Kenya that are certified, so you can get your pilots actually certified, so they know the rules and the regulations. There's a lot of, we have to all as companies create manuals about how we're going to operate, and it's mirrored with something called the Air Operator Certificate, which is what aircraft operators like to run money. So we have an AOC for operating our aircraft, and an ROC is also essential for operating your drones. All your drones have got to be registered so that the regulator can keep an eye on how many drones are in the country and what they're doing, where they are. And if you're going to, in the case of mapping, I think this is important. In the case of mapping, you have to get permission to actually go and overfly a certain area. So if we were to get a farm survey in Kiambu, we have to write to the regulator, KCAA, who also has to get authorization from the Ministry of Lands, because we're doing survey work. And if it's in a restricted area, the DoD have to also give the Department of Defense have to also give their okay. This is exactly the same in doing any aerial photography that's been going on for decades. So it's similar, but it is absolutely essential that the regulation is there. It is challenging, but it needs to be challenging, because I think we've all seen on YouTube and the things that drones are used for. Drones can be used for delivering goods into prisons. I know that the UK, for instance, has had a big challenge with that. So it is essential that they're regulated, and for the safety aspects. And the second part of your question, if you could just remind me, the privacy issue is also a major factor, because when drones first started coming out there, they were sort of more toys and everyone thought they were great, but they are now so sophisticated. Your $500 or $600 drone, if you wanted it, would fly 7 kilometers away from where you are with an extremely good camera, and that does bring big privacy issues. So hence the regulation is absolutely critical. And I think the awareness now in all the countries, with the police force, with communities, and things like that, now everybody will report a drone, because of the privacy issues. So I think it's a very important issue to take into consideration that.
Oh, thank you very much. And just to remind our viewers, you can go to the chat area, to the chat room, and post your question there. And shortly, we are going to look at the questions that have come from our viewers, and we have quite a number of them. Let me go back to you, Daniel. Is the use of drones cost effective?
Yes and no. It's in our industry, which obviously is the geospatial industry, this is something that's been really interesting. There is, if you're going to try and cover the whole of Nairobi, it's not cost effective because it will take too long with the type of drones that are available under our regulation and things like that. One of the big things that something like Zipline has to contend with is the line of sight issue. So for a company like Ramani, we are limited to, we have to keep our drones within sight. Something like Zipline, they go out, they're beyond line of sight. But if so again, it's the weight and the payload and the endurance. For instance, just to give you an example, the aerial camera that we put in our aircraft is 100 kilos. So in order for a drone to carry that camera, which is a very, very sophisticated sort of camera, it gets very heavy. So, but as this technology gets smaller and smaller, you can put those into smaller aircraft. Where drones is fantastic and where it really has an opportunity in the geospatial industry is for smaller areas. So you have the land surveyors on the ground doing your 1 to 50 acre sites and doing your cadastral survey and your little topographical surveys. And then you have your bigger aircraft surveys, which might be doing 50 kilometers and upwards, 50 square kilometers I'm talking about. There's this niche area right in between the two where drones is absolutely ideal. And it's relatively low cost, whereas an aircraft and a big aerial survey camera will cost you up $500,000 and north of that, whereas you could get a drone with a decent camera and a decent sensor for $30,000. So it is very cost effective in terms of areas, but when you're asked to map the entire county of Kajiado, it then is not a cost-effective solution. So there's pros and there's cons. It depends on the sort of sensor you've got and the needs. Where I see a big opportunities in the monitoring is simple monitoring. So construction monitoring, I think, is, if we're building the SGR, for instance, and we need to monitor that on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, this is where drones can be really effective, because the constant revisit with an aircraft is very expensive and is not affordable at all, whereas a constant revisit with a drone of a small area is really cost effective. And so the monitoring and the inspection side of the industry is I think there's great opportunity there.
Oh, thank you very much, Daniel. Let me go back to Scott. And again, sitting from Geneva, you're able to kind of give us the side of the story from that side of the world. How has Europe, for instance, dealt with these challenges of privacy, including data privacy? The data that is collected using the cameras that are attached to drones.
Since I focus mainly on the cargo areas, and I would say it's an area that I don't spend as much time in terms of data from imaging. But I will say what we see in Europe with data in general, having come originally from the United States, that there's a different standard here for data privacy than there would be in the United States. And I would say here they'd be taking it much more seriously than they would. But anytime you're dealing with a new technology, I think it's important to realize that often the regulatory mechanisms are catching up with the technology. So whether it's drones in regards to data, whether it's in regards to their use and requirements, they are often responding after there is a problem. And so I think it's important that people start thinking ahead of what type of policies need to be put in place. I'll give you an example more on the cargo side, but here in Switzerland, there was a drone company that was flying, and they had a couple accidents, so they had to stop. So at that point, they started to create a requirement that before they allow drones to fly, they have to go through wind testing at a special kind of wind tunnel to make sure they can withstand various types of turbulence. You would think it would have been the other way around. They would have first come up with a policy and then certified people. But this is what we see in this space, whether it's with privacy or other types of drone use. It is a lot of times playing catch up. So where possible, I think it's for people to kind of do some scenario planning and understand what challenges do we foresee. And obviously you want to avoid any major issues happening that no one had thought there was a potential for. Over.
Thank you very much, Scott. Hawkins, I know one of the challenges that you've been dealing with is the challenge of range. But I also know from my interactions with you a few months back that range is a product of the type of drone and what runs the drone. Maybe you could talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, range as a constraint is mostly a logistics question.
And perhaps because we are getting a bit technical here, you could tell our viewers what we mean by range.
A range is distance that your drone can cover with a payload that you have on board. For example, in a logistics questions like what someone has just mentioned, your payload would really influence how far your drone can go. So basically, if your payload increases to maybe on the same equipment to 4 kgs to 8 kgs, then your range starts reducing because you're consuming the same amount of power from a battery. And that's how drones are basically designed. But not to get a bit too technical.
Just pause there, Hawkins. So you talked about batteries. Can they also use engines?
You also have gas-powered with gas turbine engines, but the trend has been more to more environmentally sustainable drones. So we are getting a lot of battery-powered drones across board. But we do have, especially for logistic questions, and when you're looking at endurance, there are drones that use gas-powered engines. And of course, there are also what you'd call hybrid, where you have a battery with a gas turbine engine, for example. So to your question about range, we do have a regulatory question, which is your ability to fly. I think Daniel and Samuel have mentioned a bit of that, and that's a beyond visual line of sight. In the current regulatory environment in Kenya, as operators, civilian operators, of course, we are not allowed to fly beyond visual line of sight, except in special cases on a case-by-case approval. And I think this is what will optimize the use of drones. Once we are able to establish a standard of operation for BVLOS operations, I think every player in this industry will be very quick to absorb the same and put it in the operation. Because to optimize the use of drones, then you need to fly it for longer, whether it's for a surveillance mission, whether it's even for a mapping mission like what Daniel does, or it's a logistics question like what Samuel is involved in. So drones now, especially for surveillance missions, we do have drones that can fly, 300 kilometers in country. We have, at Fahari Aviation, tested that as part of our building our BVLOS capability. And I think what the whole industry wants, the drone operators industry, is to leverage, work with the regulator to enable beyond visual line of sight operations. Now, from a logistics question, and I think that is what I was talking to in my my introduction. There's always there is, and talking to most of the players, there is a question about. Just a moment, sorry. There is a question about how you're able to carry a payload over a long distance of time, because most of the prospective customers want to carry, for example, 200 kilos over 200 kilometers. Now, the available technology is very expensive for that. And at Fahari Aviation, what we are doing is we're working with partners to develop that technology and make it available. But there's always a question of how affordable. It could be available, but is it economically viable? Does it offer a tangible solution to the existing modes of parcel or cargo delivery? So I think there's still a lot of work from a technology standpoint that the industry is putting in to make sure that this solution is available at an optimized cost to the general public.
Ah, okay, interesting. Scott, you would want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that was a good question. I think it was connected to the question you also asked Samuel, like, is it worth it? And I think that's coming from a public health background and using drones for that purpose, but also being involved in conversations where it's for commercial purposes. I will say that we don't only ask the question, what is it cost effective? Because it has to be related to value and what are we trying to do? And I'll give you the example that in some cases, I'm in Switzerland, I don't know how to ski, but you see helicopters rescuing people off mountains. That's a very expensive thing to do. But somebody said that there was value in doing that. But we aren't using helicopters all the time to pick people up and drop people off. So somebody's making a judgment on the value. So with the drone, it might not pay for itself, but you might save lives through using drones. I've worked with DHL in some of our drone work. They have been involved in some of the projects in Africa, at least viewing and sometimes participating slightly. But DHL itself was interested in drones, but they have a specific price point they have to hit. Unless we can get it to this price, there is no point for us to use a drone. It is better for us to use a truck. And so these are some of the questions that are being asked, which haven't been answered. I was kind of saying before, we haven't figured out some of this stuff. And with drones, we've mainly been using them in rural areas because we haven't figured out how to use them in urban areas quite as well. There's a regulation issue. There's weather issues. People would be surprised how little we know about weather on a micro level. So it's very hard to know whether you should be flying between buildings or not. So you use them in rural areas, and you would say, we put a drone somewhere. It has a radius of 200 kilometers. And distance is important to know because if you have a strong headwind, if you have a heavy payload, it really reduces the distance you could fly. So when you're talking to a drone provider, they will say we fly 200 kilometers. Well, that's in perfect weather. That's typically with a very light payload. So you start to maximize payload. If you're in a rural area helping health facilities, you will know rural areas are sparsely populated. And so within that radius you have, where you can maybe fly 100 kilometers out, 100 kilometers back, so you have this 100-kilometer radius. There might not be that many health facilities which sit within that radius because it's in a rural area. And so you have to say, is it worth it to invest in this asset? And right now the cost is very high, but you expect it to come down over time. And so that will be interesting to see as costs come down, as battery technology increases and drone technology increases. I think you'll also be able to make the case on an economic level. So sometimes it is purely economics, and sometimes it is beyond that in terms of what the value is. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. There is a direct question here to Hawkins and Daniel, and it's a very specific question. I think this should be coming from a customs officer, going by the way the question is phrased. And so the question is, I'm trying to paraphrase because it's a long one. So I send a drone to the border to do surveillance. What output am I expecting from the drone? Is it just the visuals? What level of data analytics can be attached to the process of getting information from that drone or through that drone? I don't know. Daniel, would you want to start and then we can go to Hawkins?
I believe Hawkins is probably more qualified to answer this, but the drone can carry any form of sensors. So if on border control, obviously at night, quite a lot of cross-border things take place, which are, people smuggling or whatever. That I think is more of a security side on the border control. If you're using thermal imaging, you can tell if, for instance, there is a heat source within a container. Now that might be people, migration, things like that. It's the feedback you will get is real-time imaging, and then using AI or people, you then interpret that, which is which then to get the appropriate answers. But I think I'll hand over to Hawkins to give a better answer on to that.
Thank you, Daniel. I think there's a few items that we have to consider on this particular mission. I'm assuming a certain range that has been defined by the mission, I would say maybe 15, 20, 50 kilometers. And then from a data perspective, you will either be looking, for example, most of the drones that we currently have available, especially the ones for surveillance use cases, have some extent of data processing already inbuilt in them. So they can basically overlay maps. That's giving you, the good thing about drone data, it's geo-referenced. So it has a GPS coordinate on the data itself. So you're able to know where the exact geographical location of that particular image. And then having processed that, and with what Daniel has just mentioned, a lot of these activities tend to happen at night. So with your thermal cameras, you're able to identify fast movement, track that particular movement if you have live feed. So you're able to map the flight path to follow that particular signal that's being emitted. It's a heat signal also. And then bring in law enforcement at a particular point. So I think the biggest data is geo-referenced images. I think that's the biggest data that you'd be able to get from drones. And then your ability to control that drone to a particular point of interest, follow an area of concern, maintain hovering ability. So if you want to particularly come lower, get more clearer images, that's what drones can help you do.
Oh, thank you. There is another question here on GPS mapping, and I think again, Hawkins, you can address this. And the question is about how long it will take to map out an estate of apartments. I know that it depends on the size of the estate, but do you want to talk about that? How long would it take to map out and give a report that can tell me directly how much I would expect in terms of tax from that area?
So looking at smaller geographical area, and I'm looking about our areas where you have high-rise buildings, residential especially.
So something like 2 or 3 kilometers squared?
Yeah, 2 or 3 kilometers, 10, 25, even 100 square kilometers. I think this drones can do very well. Capturing the data. Sorry, Commissioner, I didn't get you there.
I was just saying 100 kilometers is the whole of Nairobi.
Yeah, to an extent, you can do that. You bring in beyond visual line of sight operations. Drone can actually do a lot more in terms of mapping that. What you require in terms of additional workload is the processing time. But taking maybe a sample area of 2-3 kilometers square with the processing requirement in the background, I think that could take you a week. Yeah.
With what kind of output?
You're looking at
number of apartments and the rent payable in that area?
Yeah. The thing about the drone data right now and the processing capability that we have, you first have to let the machine learn. So you put in the boundaries of the data that you're looking for, and then process that. And we've seen that the software, the particular softwares that are available are quite fast. So I think that's possible.
Oh, amazing, amazing. Gentlemen, this has been completely fascinating, a very interesting topic. As we draw towards the end, I want to ask a question to all of you, just 2 more questions. And there's a question that I'd want each one of us to address. What do you see as the future of drones? Maybe we can start with you, Samuel.
Thank you, Commissioner. And then thank you all the panelists for the insights you've given. I've learned a lot actually today. So the future of drones. I think that drone is a big new thing. When you even look at the projections toward the funds toward drone operations, you will see that it is the next big thing. With what Zipline is already doing, I think it is actually operations that is futuristic. Nowhere in time would you have sat down and thought that a patient will be in the hospital and then needs blood, and then a drone will come deliver it, instead of the traditional method of, okay, let's refer the person. However, I think there's still a lot of avenues to explore with drone, because there are still a lot of issues in the world. I usually look at beyond very specific problems that very specific entities look at. I think there's a generalized problem that the world is actually facing, which drone companies are trying to mitigate in every little way that they can. One of the biggest issues right now that I think all drone companies are actually fighting to mitigate, including what Hawkins just said, including what Daniel is saying, has to do with inequality. Right. Inequality, there's a huge inequality gap. And I see that the future of drone is to bridge that. There shouldn't be a case where somebody in Nairobi gets a very good drug to treat their case, and then somebody very far away in another small village doesn't actually get the same drug to treat their same disease condition just by virtue of location. So I think drone services is the big thing in the future. I'm also talking about e-commerce and then also postal and parcel services. These are things that I foresee that drones are coming to do. I've watched a lot of, I'm an enthusiast. Obviously, I'm working here in this space, and then I'm an enthusiast. I see what people try to foresee what drones will be able to do, including firefighting in buildings, including rescue missions like even Scott have just said from the mountains. But the question is how wide scale, how sustainable is this going to be? And that is what I'm looking at. That is going to be one of the big things in the world. Looking at how fast zipline has scaled to now in 9 different countries, and then with the pipeline, we are looking at 15 countries at the end of this year. It tells me that most of the problems in this world is actually going to be mitigated using this unmanned area logistics. And I'm very happy that all of us here are in agreement of that. And then we all cordially work toward giving this world a better place, because all the drones that we also operate with are carbon efficient because they emit very little carbon, which also goes a long way to sustain the environment that we are in. Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner, and the listeners.
Thank you, Samuel. Thank you very much. Scott, the future of drones?
Thank you. That is a big question. And well, first, let me say thank you for having me, and thanks to the fellow panelists for their inputs. And I would say, again, with my hat on as somebody who deals more with cargo and drones, I mean, because on the imaging side, I think we've seen it's more mature, and we've seen it's many uses, and that will continue to be refined. I think those uses will become more available to the common person to use them as well. And so I think we have a good idea of how it's going to progress. And of course, new creative ways for imaging will happen. But on cargo, and cargo, I mean, even people, it is really unclear how this will all unfold. I think often as we try to guess what the future will look like, when we look at movies from the past and they envision the future, they are often incorrect. And we see a lot of challenges now, even in the US. There's less drone delivery than there is in Africa. But the likes of Amazon and Google are trying very hard. But it's just complicated. How do you fly a drone, say, through a city, and where does it land? And are people going to feel okay with the drone flying over their homes and so on? So there's a lot to figure out, and these are questions I even ask myself all the time. I think no question drones will be part of the future, but how it looks, I'm uncertain. But I'm excited to see what happens with the drone companies themselves. Likely there's many out there right now. What you typically see in any industry is consolidation over time. And so there'll be fewer drone providers, most likely, who are investing more in technologies. There'll be better technology for traffic management, and there'll be better technologies for avoiding sense and avoid. But how do we lay out in a city, drone ports that go on top of a building? Okay, but then how do you get to the top of the building? Is something to walk through my apartment building to get to the top of the building? There's some really interesting things that we'll have to figure out what that actually will look like. And I'm not the only one feeling this way, because I was invited a couple of years ago to a meeting with NASA, which I was very fortunate. And NASA was trying to figure out what should they help with to move urban air mobility forward. And they were even trying to figure out what is the biggest challenges. There's so many challenges to address. So it's interesting. I'm excited to see how it plays out. I can't give you any answers, unfortunately, specifically what it look like, but drones are here to stay, and it's an exciting time for us to help shape actually how it starts to look, I think we have a place in that. Over. Thank you.
It looks like as we move forward, there are as many ethical and philosophical questions to ask ourselves about drones as there are technical questions.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Hawkins, what is it? Are we still going to have the air taxis from Times Tower where I'm sitting to JKIA and back soon? What is the future of drones in your opinion?
No, I think advanced air mobility is the future. It's just a question of what? Ecosystem time before we are able to realize it. But I'll just to echo back a bit and say drones have already proved their worth. There are industries and sectors that have adopted drones fully. There are some use cases that I would say, quote unquote, are struggling or maybe might not be the best use for drones, especially with the technology that's available now. I think a lot will depend on regulation beyond technology, regulation and how jurisdictions are able to move in terms of traffic management, in terms of infrastructure development. I think Scott has just mentioned vertiports, how you're going to design them, where you're going to how you're going to access them, which other points within a city would have that. So I think there's a lot more in the air. And as I always say, I think from a unmanned flight perspective, we're just scratching the surface. I would say we are what, 2% of what is expected of it. So I think there's still a lot of work for the industry to do, both from a development side, technology development, infrastructure development, including traffic management. But I think drones are here to stay. And I see the future more in the space of e-commerce. I think there's a lot of potential in that space. There's a lot of potential also in heavy cargo logistics. I think with technology developing, we'll see a lot of efficiencies that drones are able to position to the market, and also from a mobility perspective as well. So your question about Times Tower and JKI and saving yourself that time in traffic, I think will be answered in the next few years. Maybe 5, maybe a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Daniel, over to you. What do you think is the future of drones?
The future I'm very excited about is riding the pride of Africa across Nairobi in an air taxi, for sure. So Hawkins, I look forward to that. I think one of the things that will develop is that drones will become synonymous with the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is essentially, in simple terms, is lots and lots of sensors connected to the internet, so you can gather an amazing amount of data. And an example could be, say, air sort of pollution measurements across the city of Nairobi, where at the moment we could end up putting 1,000 different monitors across the city. But actually, what could be happening is that a drone could be an Internet of Thing with absolutely no human interaction, and could be flying around picking up the pollution readings for us. And so the tying in of IoT and drones right down the line could be something where you've got a lot of flying sensors around. The other thing that I think is important to mention is the sort of separation between the sort of drone platforms and the sensors. The sensors are where my real interest is as a geospatial person. The drones are phenomenal. The flying platforms, they've progressed so much over time. But what becomes really interesting is the actual sensors that we start to put on these things. And I'm talking about imaging sensors, LiDAR, which is a laser sensor, and these kind of things, and the software that goes with that. Those three things have enabled our industry to really take advantage, and each of them has been as equally important as the other. But I'm very excited about what it all holds for us, and just the delivery that Zipline is just phenomenal. So yeah, I think it's really exciting. So, but thank you very much for having us and having me, and it's been very enjoyable. Thank you.
Absolutely amazing. And gentlemen, it has been my absolute pleasure hosting the four of you just to delve into this very interesting but also quite technical, question on drones and what we can use drones, especially for in the area of public revenue mobilization, looking at what we can do with drones in the area of the geospatial mapping for purposes of rental income, but also looking at what we can do with drones to enhance our patrols of the borders and all these other use cases that we have gone through. I can assure you, you're not seeing the last of us. We will be engaging you as we move along, and it has been absolutely pleasurable for all of us, and I believe for all the viewers this afternoon. We have had many viewers, running with us for the last 2 hours. You wouldn't believe it. We've been here for 2 hours, and there's a topic that we cannot really, conclude within these 2 hours. And so I want to say thank you very much, and we look forward to hosting you in future. And so Daniel, Hawkins, Scott, and Samuel, enjoy your evening. Thank you very much. We appreciate that you found time to be with us. And so, ladies and gentlemen, again, it has been my pleasure hosting the 4th Economic Dialogue. My name is Mugambi Muirigi, and we look forward to the 5th KESRA Economic Dialogue, which will come up in the next month or so. And so back to you, Wanjiko.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just want to say, I think from myself and the entire team and everybody at KESRA, we just want to thank everybody for attending and for the engagement. It has been extremely enlightening. I think we can all say that we leave here learning a little more than we came in knowing about drones. So thank you very much to all our panelists. Thank you to our moderator. I really appreciate it. Before I let you all leave, I think it would be remiss of me not to mention our unofficial sponsor. So the Economic Dialogues are sponsored by the Tax Prism, which is a magazine, a quarterly magazine that is published and put together by a team at KESRA, which is the Kenya School of Revenue Administration. So as our thank you for attending, we would like to give you a little treat and offer you the latest digital issue of the Tax Prism for free. Well, not free, we'll cover the cost for it. However, we would therefore like to give that to you. So there should be a slide on the screen right now with the QR code. Daniel, if you can just... Okay, we're having a bit of a technical glitch with the QR code. So he's going to put the link in the chat room where you can click on the link and it will direct you to the free issue of the June to September issue of the Tax Prism. So thank you very much for attending. We really appreciate it. And we do hope that you will read the Tax Prism and you will subscribe because it is full of wonderful articles, and every quarter we have really insightful, thought-provoking articles on emerging issues. To subscribe, you can just go to our website and you will see the Tax Prism on the top banner of the website. So you can just click on that and follow the directions and instructions to subscribe. So as Daniel sends us the link, we would just like to once again say thank you very much to our panelists and to every single person who attended. And we really do hope that you will attend the next economic dialogue. So thank you. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.